I'm Scott Pelley, and thank you for joining us in our town hall. It's a series that we call Things That Matter, in which we talk to Americans about the things that matter the most to our country and look at them in a bipartisan way. Our guest today is Ben Sasse, former United States Senator of Nebraska, who was once described as the smartest man in the Senate. He'll deny it, but here's why they have said that. Ben has a degree in government from Harvard. He has an ethics degree. He has a PhD in history from Yale. All of this coming out of a small town, Fremont, Nebraska, 27,000 people. And he was in Nebraska, in Fremont, in 2015 when he was recruited to run for the United States Senate. He'd never run for dog catcher before, nothing, ever. So he runs for U.S. Senate and wins all 93 counties in Nebraska. Has a terrific initial run in the Senate, stands for re-election, once again, landslide victory, and then about 2 years into his second term, he did the unthinkable. He quit. He left the Senate, and we'll let him tell us why, and became president of the University of Florida, one of the top 10 universities in the country by student enrollment. So in December, Ben announced to the world that he has stage 4 pancreatic cancer. It has spread throughout his torso. He has 5 types of cancer now. He was expected to be dead by now, but there is a brand new drug that's in clinical trials. It's a whole new concept in cancer treatment, and his tumors have shrunk by 76%. It is not believed that it's going to save him, but it will certainly give him a great deal more time, and we're grateful for your time here today.
I'm glad to be with you, and well summarized. I'm going to use that to explain it to my Aunt Georgine.
Well, we have a number of questions from our audience, because in this series we like to bring in Americans of all walks of life to tell us what is on their minds. And so I want to start with a question from Reverend Rob Lofberg. Reverend?
Senator, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your gracious and thoughtful witness in your time in public life. I've benefited a lot from your books and podcast. It's great. Thank you. In the last couple months, you have endured a tremendous amount of physical pain, the loss of certain abilities you've long held, and I imagine an amount of personal, emotional suffering. How has that changed how you talk to God?
Great question. Thank you for making time for us. I lost 24 pounds in a hurry early on, sort of just pre-diagnosis and then early diagnosis. And I was moderately fit before that, and my pecs evaporated really fast. And so I think I'm probably slightly more emotional because I'm going through heavy stuff, but I also have that little quiver you get sometimes, like when you see your kids on a bike and life looks great, the sun's shining on their face, and you feel like this is a glorious day, and you get that quiver. I just break down crying now, and I'm sure it's a little bit emotional, but I also think I just lack some of the muscles that used to hold it in check in the past. So whether talking to God or anybody, I think I cry a good bit more than I used to. But Tim Keller, who was a pastor in my denomination who died of pancreatic cancer, said one time that pancreatic cancer is a wicked, wicked form of cancer that he'd never wish on anybody. But at the same time, he wouldn't like to go back to a time where he didn't know the prayer that flowed from pancreatic cancer. And I think that's a good summary for me as well, in that I definitely feel my finitude and my dependence more now than I did 6 or 12 months ago. And I think that's a real blessing because it's true. I can't get my face to regrow skin a lot of the time. How could I possibly keep the planets in their orbit and have planting and harvest seasons at the right temperature to bring forth food? We are dependent creatures, and knowing we are dependent creatures is a blessing, not a curse. So I'm grateful for the humbling that has come from a lot of this. I also think it's pretty amazing in the gospel when the disciples are trying to give Jesus a break. He clearly doesn't want to be fully understood yet as the Messiah, and he wants a break from the crowds, and the disciples are trying to keep even the little children from him. And he says, no, let the little children come to me. We're the little children. And that we get to pray to God with the name Abba, Dada, Daddy, that we get to admit our finitude, our weakness, and our dependence, and go to God and acknowledge how small we are. What a blessing.
Well, in my detailed CV for former Senator Sasse, I left out the most important part. He is deeply committed to his faith, always has been. You're a Calvinist, Protestant Calvinist. I wonder, have you asked God why you and why now?
Not really, because I think it's kind of always surprising that there's not more effects of the curse more immediately on all of us. When I look at how broken my soul is, any day that the sun shines feels like common grace that I didn't deserve. And any day that I get to open the scriptures and hear that God desires fellowship with humanity and sent a mediator to atone for our sin is a glorious gift of grace. And so I'm not of the school, why do bad things happen to good people? It's why does anything good ever happen?
I left another thing out of my CV. It occurs to me now. It's the third most important thing to know about Senator Sasse. He is devoutly religious. He is a tremendous family man with almost 4 decades with his wife, and he has 3 lovely children. And the third most important thing is you're a Republican. I left that out.
No, that is not third most, maybe 32nd most.
32nd most, okay.
Politics are going to be way down the list of the rank-ordered identities I have. Zealous Nebraska football fan trumps any political identity I might have.
Gotcha. So we have another question from our audience here. Mike Hugo. Mike?
Senator Sasse, great to see you thriving here.
Thank you.
I'm 37 years old. I was diagnosed with glioblastoma. I had 2 little daughters, 5 and 7 at the time. I'm 4 years out. Now they're 9 and 11. Went through a clinical trial, and I'm at 1 out of 1,000 patients, and doing that with Optune.
Wow.
You did the Right to Try bill. You co-sponsored the Right to Try bill years ago. And are you aware that almost no one is actually getting that treatment? So the treatment I got and the treatment that you got in the clinical trial, unfortunately, no other Americans can get it because of the bureaucracy.
Yeah. So let's say 2 human things first, and then let's dive at the thrust of your question around experimental science. First of all, I'm sorry about your disease, and I'm not just sorry for you, but for your family and your daughters. It is a hard thing to see Dad going through what you're going through, and I hope you get very meaningful and thick time with them, and that they remember the fight that you're putting up. So just at a human level first. My view as a kind of one cheer for government kind of guy is there are lots of ways we can fall off cliffs. No government, terrible idea. Too much government, terrible idea. No government doesn't understand that the world's broken and there's somebody who wants to take your life and your liberty and your stuff, and we should have shared infrastructure projects around not just roads, but drug development and cancer research as well. Too much government is a government that tries to homogenize every question and think a bureaucracy can find the right one set of rules. My view, and as somebody who's blessed now that I've been regrowing a lot of skin on my face the last 10 days, but from 3 weeks ago until 10 days ago, I wasn't very presentable in public because I had skin just crumbling off my forehead, scalp, nose, cheeks, tongue, and I was bleeding everywhere. That was a byproduct of a drug that I'm on that is doing amazing things. I am grateful for this drug. I want more people to have access to this drug, and people may make different decisions about how much side effect they're willing to endure. I'd rather decentralize a lot more of those decisions to individuals, patients, and their care providers rather than one-size-fits-all rules at the FDA. Again, lots of great Americans who work at the FDA. I just think we tend to dial it a little too tight on the idea that Washington should be in charge of who gets access to these drugs, and especially experimental drugs. We can just do the math around more experiments are going to yield more great outcomes at a population health level. I'm glad it's working for you right now, but 5 and 10 and 15 years from now, it isn't just my clinical trial or your clinical trial. It's the fact that in the case of my disease, 67,000 Americans are diagnosed with pancreatic cancer every year, and the survival rate is tiny. Let's make a dent in that. The best way to make a dent in that is more experiments. And so I would love a world where on the how much risk are you willing to endure to get access to a new trial or to allow our greatest scientific minds and researchers to experiment, I'd like to open up the dial quite a bit and let a lot more people get access to these drugs.
The right to try bill that Mike just described, what was it designed to do?
I mean, at the simplest level, it is saying to the FDA, let's let a lot more people have access to these drugs, even though there will be some bad side effects. And so let's allow a lot more experimentation, a lot less bureaucrats saying no to doctors and patients who say, let me have a shot at it.
Particularly for patients who have no options.
Exactly.
Did that become law?
It did, but there were different amendments on it that I think made it a little stricter than we had expected it might be at the beginning. And I don't comment much on the particulars of policy because I'm not current on all these topics, and I'm also on a lot of morphine. But in general, I'd like to see the FDA open it up a good bit. Let's air it out a bit.
You're on a lot less morphine than you were before.
That's true.
And because I'm fascinated, give me 2 seconds to tell you about this drug. It is, if I understand it correctly, and there's always a danger, a new approach to cancer therapy. It's not a systemic poison, if you will, like so many chemotherapy drugs are. This is a drug that is like a jamming device. Senator has 2 genes that are sending out signals to the body that telling the body grow, grow, grow. And they never say stop. That's cancer. This drug acts as a jammer that prevents the signal from getting through. The defective genes are still sending the signal, but this stops the signal from getting through to the rest of the body. That is roughly
well explained. That's
roughly the
jammer
concept.
Analog is the exact same way I understand it.
And so, like you said, your tumor shrank 76% so far. It's astounding. This is in clinical trials. The company that makes the drug and developed the drug just announced the end of the 3rd phase of the clinical trials and reported that patients like Senator Sasse would typically have around 6 months to live, but on this drug they are showing 13 months and counting. So a wonderful thing.
Glorious bit of science, and a whole bunch of families that, like yours, get a lot more months together. We're all on the clock, but man, there's a difference between 13 months and 4 or 6.
2 daddy-daughter dances that
Amen.
no one said I would ever make.
Amen. Those memories are for a lifetime.
Well done. Well done, Mike. Thank you for that great question. Now, we're going to move to the back row to Anais Arouse. Anais?
Senator Sasse, it's an honor. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
My father suffered from early onset Alzheimer's at age 54 that left him unable to care for himself. By the time of his death, just a few weeks ago, he didn't even know his own name. He was 63. Without my mom, my sister, and me, he would have been on the street. You have talked a lot about the collapse of community. In a country as large, diverse, and individualistic as the U.S., what can we do for those who don't have a family or resources when serious illness hits? Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for your question, and I'm sorry about your loss of your dad. I'm sure those 9 years had sparks of special moment and a lot of ache and pain, so I'm sorry for your suffering, including so recently. I believe in a social safety net. I'm skeptical of the idea that Washington comes up with enough pluralism and diversity to meet the needs of all of our communities. I would like to see our governors and state legislatures be a lot more powerful, and our federal legislature and bureaucracies in Washington, D.C. be a little less powerful and homogenized. I would like to see a lot more of our social safety net and welfare spending block granted to states so states could experiment more. I think that a government, and again, government is a super important shared function that we have, but a government is inevitably a monopoly, and monopolies typically fail because they don't have enough experimentation. And instead of failing one way from Washington, D.C. that's the same everywhere, I'd rather have us have 50 states experimenting, and maybe we fail 45 or 47 or 49 ways, but it's probably not 50 of 50 same ways. And you'd be able to experiment with a little more community care and aging in place and thickness about how you manage a patient going through Alzheimer's or dementia type issues, where different communities got to experiment. We're recording this in Florida. Florida's glorious. Nebraska's the most glorious. New York and Illinois and New Mexico are all wonderful places as well, but I would like to see more experiments happen at a local level so governors and legislatures can learn from each other. I don't know what your experience was like with your delivery of care, but my guess is if you were experimenting and you and your mom and your sisters are trying to help your dad, it's easier to get to a state capitol than it is to get a hearing in Washington, D.C. And I'd like to see more diversity of experiments about how to care for folks like your dad going from 54 to 63.
We have a question from Joshua Proctor.
Thank you so much. First of all, I work in a Presbyterian church, so I love the reference to Tim Keller there. But my question for you is, Pete Hegseth has framed the war in Iran in terms of a divinely sanctioned mission. And as someone who is of deeply committed Christian faith, has spent many years in Republican politics, and I've appreciated the nuance with which you've spoken, where do you see the line between a politician's faith genuinely guiding their decisions, which I would say most Americans agree with, respect, versus exploiting religion for political ends? And along with that, I'm wondering how facing your own mortality has impacted the way you see that line.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So first of all, in my tradition and in Christianity more broadly, we often talk about the kingdom of the right hand and the kingdom of the left hand. And common grace, the secular sphere, is still God's space and God's sphere, but it's a question of whether or not explicit revealed theology is guiding our government. And I think that the purposes of government are to maintain order. It's not to be theologically precise or accurate about what anybody should believe. The First Amendment is the most glorious inheritance anybody's ever gotten in the history of government. Government is not the most important thing in the world, but it is glorious that our First Amendment has freedom of religion, speech, press, assembly, protest, or redress of grievances. But that means that what I want government to do is create a space that is free from violence so people can worship as they see fit, whether I agree with them or disagree with them. As a neighbor, I might want to wrestle with theology with somebody, but I don't want to use the state to accomplish theological ends. I want to maintain order for a secular sphere that is free from violence. So I don't subscribe to views of geopolitics as God is accomplishing a precise thing in those places. I think our servant leaders are responsible for using their time in office to try to minimize violence, maximize order, human liberty. In my view, the future of geopolitics 10 or 40 years from now is going to be more US-led or more Chinese Communist Party-led. And I would rather have open navigation of the seaways, freedom of religion, human rights, commerce, trade, transparent contracts. And so I would rather have there be more US-led freedoms for the world, but not because the US is an eternal entity. The US is just the best experiment in government we've ever known, but governments are going to pass away. Ultimately, at the end of days, when we all wrestle through and with the questions around our own mortality, there will be no more tears, there will be no more cancer, there will also be no more government. Government is a tool. It's a really important tool, but it's a time-limited tool.
We mentioned at the beginning, Ben, that despite a very successful political career, you quit the Senate in roughly the middle of your second term. And I wonder, what was it about the Senate that made you think you were not making progress there?
So the Senate is a great institution. It has been greater in the past and it needs to be greater in the future, but it is still a very important institution. We sometimes call it the world's greatest deliberative body. There's not enough deliberation happening there right now, but I hope that it happens again. I wasn't looking to leave the Senate. I was just mindful of the fact that we were very, very unproductive. And when I first ran for office in 2014, my girls were 12 and 10 and son was 2. And I knew I was going to be flying away from home a lot of every week to be serving in Washington, but the family was still living in Nebraska. And I was missing way too many family dinners. I was still pulling on oars to do that work. I wasn't looking to leave, but when I was called to become the president of the University of Florida, it seemed like the math was pretty easy that we could accomplish more at an institution like that, where there was an ability to string together strikes and spares and add up to something at a time when the Senate wasn't very productive. So I want to be clear, I didn't leave the Senate because the Senate is bad. I was pulled to something that was bigger and better for a time. And frankly, I want a lot more experiments about age 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26. The AI revolution we're going through is going to require us to build tougher, grittier humans. The University of Florida is one of the special institutions doing that. We need a lot more institutions building things like that.
And with that, we'll move to our last question from Lindsay Wynn. Lindsay?
Thank you for being here.
Lindsay.
Your positivity is an inspiration.
Kind of you.
Senator Sasse, you've been a senator, a university president, a policymaker, an author, and most recently, a podcaster. But if you remove all these titles, accolades, and the many, many impressive achievements during your lifetime, how do you want your children to remember you?
Oh, that's big, Lindsay. Thank you. Thanks for mentioning the podcast. When you have a terminal diagnosis, you feel like you should launch a podcast, because I'm a Monty Python fan, so we call it Not Dead Yet. And Chris Starwell, my co-podcaster, and I said, let's go and interview some interesting people about how you redeem the time, because we're all on the clock and you want to prioritize the limited time you have. I hope my kids remember me as someone who was grateful for the many blessings that we've all inherited, but was also able to daily repent and acknowledge my brokenness and my finitude. And I'm glad when you run through titles that are around work, I was hoping you'd give me a chance to say which titles do I like more, and they are husband, dad, son, friend, neighbor. We all need to pay the bills. But the ways that we earn our living are not the most important titles. The most important titles are those relational ones to the people next to us. And so sinner who's been redeemed is probably top of my list.
Just before we came in here, Senator Sasse and I sat down for an interview on 60 Minutes. And in doing the research for that interview, I was curious about his last name. He comes from the great German tradition in Nebraska. And it turns out Sasse is medieval German for, believe it or not, citizen. So you're Ben Citizen. Tell us, please, what the citizens of this country can do to set America on a better course.
We are entering a fascinating moment where AI tools are going to give all of us access to all the data on Earth, right? Once upon a time, the Gutenberg Revolution made it so that regular citizens could get access to books, right? Amazing thing that books became so cheap that regular folks, regular farmers could have them. There was still a difference between a library and a school. Having access to all the information is not the same thing as having a community to progress through it. And I think in a way, the internet of 1994-95 becoming the AI algorithmic tools and large language models of today is analogous to that fire hose of information in the library not being quite like school yet, we have an opportunity now when intelligence is going to be commodified to figure out what it means to have thick community again, even at a place where all the information of the whole world is accessible to us every place. And so we're going to need to rebuild community thickness around extended kin networks and workplaces and places of worship. And wherever your listeners tonight are going to break bread, they should regard that as the center of the world. And there's a big temptation in this moment to look at the super tools in our pockets and say, the really interesting thing is something happening far, far away. The opposite is true. The most interesting place to be is where you're still gonna be with your kids despite a terrible cancer diagnosis, where you get to break bread tonight and you can wipe away somebody's tears and you can give somebody a hug and you can encourage them, and you can read a story aloud together. And even though we have Spotify and whatever other streaming service, you can make music where you live. You can make babies where you live. The center of the world needs to be the place where 330 million Americans are raising their kids and breaking bread tonight, and we need to revivify, re-enchant that sense of place and thick community.
And there is no better place to end. Thank you very much, Ben Sasse. Thank all of you. We're going to have many conversations on CBS News in our Things That Matter series, and we are so grateful to you and grateful to you for participating. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you all.